Let's take a look at a subject which is the question of the process that leads from leaving Egypt to Sinai, and try to understand some of the most difficult issues connected with this process. Let's begin like this. You know that the whole of the Torah and the whole of Jewish life and thought and practice really is based on the exodus from Egypt, right? We say Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. We're talking about remembering the process of leaving Egypt, and specifically the miracles that were associated with that event. Correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Anyone out there?
Yes.
Okay. For example, the Rambam says like this in the 7th chapter of Hilchos Chametz Matzah, dealing with the mitzvah of the Seder. He says this: mitzvahs. I want to read you a few sources and see if we can put our heads into them as deeply as possible. Listen carefully. Mitzvahs essay shel Torah. It is a positive mitzvah of the Torah. Lesaper, to tell. Here he's describing the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the mitzvah of telling the story of leaving Egypt, right? Which the Torah says very clearly. He quotes the verse because it says, "Zachas hayom hazeh asher yitzasem mitzrayim." Remember this day that you went out of Egypt. So how would you complete the sentence? Let me begin the sentence for you. Mitzvah's essay. It is a positive mitzvah shel Torah. Lesaper, to tell. How would you complete that? The story of. But he doesn't say that. He says, "Benisim v'niflais," the miracles and wonders, she'nasu lavaseh, that were done for our forefathers b'Mitzrayim, in Egypt, b'leil chamisha, on the 15th of Nisan. Not a word about the Exodus. Again. The mitzvah here is to tell the story of leaving Egypt, right? Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's what the mitzvah is called. And the verse that he quotes is, "Zaches hayom hazeh asher yitzasim mitzrayim," that you left Egypt. How do you fulfill the mitzvah, says the Rambam? You sit around the Pesach Seder and you talk about the nisim v'niflas, miracles and wonders that occurred to our forefathers in Egypt. Not a word about the Exodus. Evidently the Rambam understands that the way you fulfill the mitzvah of telling about leaving Egypt is by talking about miracles. In fact, he doesn't even get as far as saying that the miracles that were associated with the Exodus itself. He says what happened on the 15th of Nisan. You know, in the Rambam's Haggadah, he did not have Dayenu. You know, he gives us the text of his Haggadah. He doesn't have Dayenu. His son writes that he himself used to say it, but it is not included in the text of the Haggadah. Why not? It seems that the Rambam's concept is that the mitzvah is to talk about the miracles that occurred in Egypt, or that occurred at the transition from Egypt to leaving. Dayenu talks about lots of things that happened later. Had you not brought us to Sinai, and had you given us Sinai, but that is, according to the Rambam, not essential. The things that happened after leaving Egypt, through the desert experience, reaching Sinai, that's not what is meant by telling the mitzvah of leaving Egypt, not Exodus. What is relevant is only the Exodus itself, and according to him, only the miracles. And in case you think it's a misprint, or he forgot something, he says later, "Mitzvah lo yodea lebanim," it is a mitzvah to inform the children. Va'afilu lo shelo, even if the children never ask. This is where he's referring to the son who doesn't know how to ask, because it says you got to tell abincha, you have to tell your son. What do you tell him? Lefi daiter shel ben aviv melamdo, according to the wisdom of the child, the maturity and understanding of the child, the father has to tell him. Keitzad, how? Ima yakoten or tipesh. If the child was very young or immature, oimela, you say to him, "Bni, my son, kulanu hayinu avodim, we were all slaves, kamoshit chazu, like this maidservant, or kamo evedze." You grab one of the many servants and slaves you have walking around your home, and you pull him over and you say, "This, like this maidservant or this slave, we were like that in Egypt, and on this night, Hashem took us out, took us out to freedom." The first time and the only time the Rambam says that you mention the question of leaving Egypt is only to a child who is so young or immature that he can't understand more than that. In other words, when a child's extremely undeveloped, you say, "We were slaves and we left." But if the child was older and wiser, you tell him, You're telling what happened to us in Egypt, v'nissim shenasu, and the miracles that occurred. Al Yidei Moshe Rabbeinu, which is a separate question why the Rambam says by means of Moshe, even though, as you well know, the Haggadah doesn't mention him, virtually doesn't mention him. So why is the mitzvah, why does the Rambam here include the fact that you have to tell the children that the mitzvahs, the miracles all occurred by virtue of Moshe Rabbeinu? That's a separate question. Hakol lefi daita shel ben. Everything goes according to the wisdom of the child. In other words, the Rambam's telling us that the real mitzvah here is to become aware of the miracles that accompanied the Exodus. The fact of the Exodus, the fact that there was a geopolitical event that we were slaves and we left, is only relevant to a child who is so young that he can't possibly begin to understand the distinction between the natural and the miraculous. That's where you talk about the Exodus itself. What's going on? Why is it secondary to talk about the process of leaving Egypt and primary to talk about the style or the mode which was the miraculous? Is the question clear? I mean, a simple answer to this question before we look more deeply, I think a simplest answer to this question is the fact that what's important about us, that means the beginning of the Jewish people, what's important about us is the fact that we began in a blaze of miracles. The fact that there was a political event, a geopolitical event, that we were slaves in one place and left and went someplace else, is not fundamental in understanding what it means to be a Jew. After all, every nation has its political, geo-historical fact, right? If you're a South African, which unfortunately we can't all be, but we can strive, I suppose. If you're a South African, there was a time when, the British were in power and the brave settlers, they rejected British rule and they trekked into the interior of the country. I suppose if you're American, you have a similar story, where there was a breakaway from British dominion and, a striving for independence. Every nation has its historical, factual story, but that's not what distinguishes us from others. What is special about being the Jewish people is that we moved from this natural plane into something higher. And therefore, what's important to impress on the children of Pesach is not the fact that we had a particular historical beginning, but we had a spiritual beginning. That we lifted off this planet, in a sense, and moved into a higher mode. I think that's a basic way to grasp this issue. But here comes the problem. You've just got through Pesach telling the children about the miracles, and then the Rambam says this. This is in the 8th chapter of Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. He says this: Moshe Rabbeinu, our leader and teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu, lo yaminu bo Yisrael, the Jewish people did not believe in him mipnei ha'oseh she'asa, because of the miracles that he performed. We just got through saying that the essence of Pesach is talk about the miracles, and the Jewish people are defined by a transition into the miraculous. And here the Rambam says that anybody who believes because of miracles is problematic. She'amamin al pi ha'oseh, because anybody who believes by virtue of miracles, yesh beliboy doifi, has an imperfection in his heart. She'efshe she'yeh ha'os belat v'kishuv, because a miracle could always theoretically be done by magic, sorcery, or whatever transcendental powers that the Egyptians possessed, or others who know how to manipulate the natural forces. If you believe because you witness a miracle, there's something problematic with you. Yesh belibo dofi means there's in your heart an impure taste. Dofi is a halachic term, which means, like in the laws of vessels, right? If you have a vessel that has become absorbed, a taste that is not according to a taste that will blemish or mar whatever taste should be there, that's called dofi, right? And sometimes you either have to boil it or you have to break it. That is a term meaning an impure taste, an adulterating taste, a problematic element. So somebody who believes in Hashem, because he has witnessed miracles, is problematic. Because miracles are not conclusive. This is very problematic, very difficult to understand. The essence of Pesach is to understand that we went out of Egypt in a blaze of miracles. The whole of Torah is Yechel Yetzias Mitzrayim. The whole of Torah is going back to remembering the Exodus. And the Rambam goes on to say that if you believe in Hashem because you witnessed a miraculous sequence of events, you're problematic. And the real question here to understand is that the whole Torah is Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Many, many mitzvahs we do Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. When we make Kiddush, we are always saying Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. The whole of our identity as Jews, as Torah Jews, is remembering and based on this experience of leaving Egypt. The fundamental question is, why don't we identify ourselves with the giving of the Torah? Why isn't all of Judaism Zeichen and Matan Torah? Again, I see a lot of blank faces. The beginning of the process was leaving Egypt. The culmination of the process was Sinai. Why do we go back to the beginning of the process, which was only where the thing began, and which the Rambam says you're problematic if you believe because of that, when there was something far better? 7 weeks later, there was arriving at Sinai a personal marital connection with Hashem, not through the miraculous, but direct experience. Surely that's the culmination of the experience. We should be saying Zeicher Lematan Torah as Jews, shouldn't we? How many people here are married? You ever pull out your wedding albums? Occasionally, sometimes. Who in this room who has a wedding album has since their wedding looked at it? Okay. Who in this room since their wedding has gone back to look at their engagement photographs? You don't do that, do you? I mean, the engagement was a moment in time, you know. I suppose it was significant. It was the last chance you had to escape, maybe. But, you know, I mean, there was a process that led to the culmination, a fulfillment which is called the marriage. Why do we hark back in Judaism always to the moment of engagement? Or the moment of the beginning of the process? That was only a beginning. It was indirect. It was modulated or experienced through the miraculous, which the Rambam says is problematic. There's something much better than that. There was a personal meeting with Hashem that transcends all miraculous experience, and we don't relate to that. Do you hear the question? Who remembers a journey for the point of departure? A journey is defined by the destination. You go on vacation someplace, you go to some significant place. You remember the destination. The point of departure was necessary.
Why can't you, according to that same theory, why can't you just say, well, remember the Beit HaMikdash? That was even
maybe
greater.
Maybe. But if you want an explosive moment, the point of meeting Hashem, right? That was the Sinai experience. That was what's called Yom Chasunasai, the wedding of the Jewish people. We got married then. Yishakeni minishikos pirush, kissed us with the kisses of his mouth. That's what we say. You're right, the Beis HaMikdash was the home into which we moved. The Ramban says that the fulfillment of the whole process was when they finally built the Mishkan. And we took that personal love that we had with Hashem, that had culminated in the marriage that we had contracted with Him, into the home which is the Mishkan. Fine. Now the Rambam has to deal with the problem of why miracles were necessary. If he says that your belief by virtue of miracles is problematic, and you have something much better than miracles, namely when we met Hashem personally, what's the point of the miracles? You know, it sounds very strange, but if you think it through, it appears as if all the miracles accompanying the leaving of Egypt were almost unnecessary. What were they for? Belief by virtue of miracles is problematic. Belief, we'll see later, by virtue of personal experience is not problematic. So if the purpose of the whole experience was to bring us into personal experience, meeting Hashem at Sinai, what were the miracles necessary for? Not to found belief upon, because that's problematic. So the Rambam deals with why miracles were necessary. But rather, all the miracles that Moshe Rabbeinu performed for us in the desert, or he was the didn't perform, but he was the what? The medium, let's say. You know, the Rambam writes that every miracle needed a prophet to be its medium. That means no miracle occurred in Tanakh without the presence of a prophet. Subsequently, in the phase of the oral law, you have no more prophecy and no more miracles. I'm not going to now go into the difficult question of how the Talmudic sages were able to perform miracles. That's a separate issue. But the miracles of Tanakh, where Hashem reveals Himself openly and splits the sea and does 10 wonders in Mitzrayim, those you never have without a prophet. So you need not be a prophet to be the medium for miracles. So the miracles that revolved around Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert, why did they take place? Lefiat tzerech asam. They were done because they were needed. Each miracle was necessary. Not to bring proof to his prophecy. Why? Because miracles are not a good proof. So why were the miracles done? Because each one happened to be necessary. it was necessary to drown the Egyptians. Karas hayam. He split the sea, and he drowned the Egyptians. By the way, that itself is problematic. There are a lot of homework questions. Do you mind homework questions? You came to think, right? Didn't you?
Yep.
So here's a few questions for homework. If you get them right, Harry's going to buy you a whiskey. Expensive single malt whiskey. Why does the Rambam say it was necessary to drown the Egyptians? I would have said it's necessary to save the Jewish people. The primary reason for splitting the sea was some message for us. The Rambam says no, the primary reason was to drown the Egyptians. Very strange. But there was a need. And therefore Hashem split the ocean and he drowned the Egyptians. Sarachnu lamazon, we needed food. Hashem gave us man to eat in the desert. In other words, every miracle was done because there was a need. Some commentaries write that that the Leshem, for example, one of the great mystical Kabbalistic commentaries, Rabbi Yashiv's grandfather, he writes that the miracles were done. He gives a deep explanation here. The Rambam is giving you the first level explanation. Namely, we needed food. Food was provided. The Egyptians needed to be destroyed. We needed to be saved. The ocean was split. Right? The question that he doesn't answer, the Rambam, is why was it necessary to do those things in a miraculous fashion? There are other ways to feed people than bringing down. You know what the man was? The manna that was brought down for the Jewish people to eat. The Ramban says that the man was so elevated that they couldn't even name it. The man was food that angels eat. It's the kind of food that is, it was a material that is so spiritual that they couldn't even give it a definition. The word man means, what is it? You know, there's a principle that whenever we can't state a thing's spirituality, we say a question. When you want to talk about Hashem and you can't define what Hashem is, let's say you want to talk about Hashem's greatness. You can't talk about His greatness because it transcends anything you can say. But you want to talk about it. So we say, Ma God, we say, how great are you, Hashem? Or Mi kamocha ba'elim Hashem. Who is like you? Or Ma rabu ma'asecha. Or Ma... The Torah technique, you see, we have English ears. So we hear it in a sort of a rhetorical Shakespearean, oh how goodly, oh how great. But it's much more than that. The technique of asking a question is a response to the problem of not being able to define anything. When you can't say what a thing is, and you want to speak about it, so you say what... You ask a question which is always evoking more than what's been said. And therefore we are when the man fell, it was something so elevated that all they could say about it was to ask a question, what is this? Ki man, they called it man, ki manhu, because what is it? Put it this way, the Ramban says the man was crystallized Shekhinah. They were living on some manifestation of Hashem Himself. That's what they were absorbing. Right? That's the only way you can feed people in a desert? Or the Egyptians are attacking the Jewish people. The only way to save the Jewish people is by splitting the ocean? There's a lot of other ways to get rid of Egyptians. You know, you can have a sudden cholera epidemic. You can have the impending financial collapse. You know, the Egyptian stock market could crash. You know, there are lots of things you could do to Egyptians. You don't have to split the ocean. And even when it comes to miracles, that's probably the last thing you think of. You know, the Jewish people are surrounded on three sides by the Egyptians and the fourth by the ocean. And now there's a pressure moment. And it appears the Jewish people potentially could be wiped out. What's the solution? So you look at that and you say, well, there's three sides on which something could happen. The ocean, definitely not. And that's where Hashem takes us. Why? Why does He have to do it? So the Leshem says amazingly, very interesting, in a lengthy piece in which he refers to many Kabbalistic ideas, he says that the miracles occur because whenever history is about to be deflected off its destined and necessary path, Hashem pushes it back into line, but He does it miraculously so that you see that that's not an option. In other words, when it appears that the Jewish people's existence hangs in the balance, they're trapped at the ocean, the Egyptians are about to destroy them, which threatens the end of human existence as we know it and the end of the world, because the Jewish people must go through the desert and receive the Torah and bring that down to the world. Hashem takes pains to show that that option is not possible, and He makes it explicit by performing a miracle. Is it clear? In other words, when the Jews are trapped in Egypt and it appears that any longer there they will disappear, then Hashem not only saves them, but He does it miraculously. He reveals Himself to show that that's not an option. That the world requires this process, and even if nature has to be turned upside down, that's what will happen to manifest the fact that this process must take place. That's how the Leshem approaches the question of why Hashem saves us when it appears that we're about to be destroyed, and He does it in a miraculously explicit fashion. There's much more to say here, of course. You know that each of these miracles reveals its own. Eating manna means that we come to a situation where our sustenance is the divine, that means Hashem's presence itself. There's a tremendous message there. Or the fact that the ocean is split. You know, what is the meaning of splitting the ocean? You know that the Medrash says that the ocean split simply to give us that experience. You know, they didn't go anyplace. You know that? The Medrash says the Jewish people went into the ocean and came out again. They didn't cross over to any place. Look at the map. There's no place to cross to. Children seem to think that, you know, they crossed the Red Sea to some place. They didn't cross to any place. They didn't get to Israel. They went into the ocean, turned around and came out. The purpose of it was to be in that environment, in a split ocean, that we survive and the Egyptians do not. The Kabbalists say, and again, the same source goes into very great detail, explains that walking through the midst of the waters is a process of birth. That's called the breaking of the waters. When a woman gives birth and the child manifests out of a sack of water, you know, the child in the mother's womb is underwater. The waters break and the child is born. The Jewish people are being born here, and this is a birth experience. In fact, very, very beautiful to understand this. You know, perhaps the best way to say it is this. Reb Chaim Volozhin, the star pupil, student of the Gaon of Vilna, one occasion he went to see his Rabbi, and it was a very precious moment, obviously, and he went in to see the Gaon, and he took with him his son Yitzchak, Itzela, who was maybe 4 or 5 years old at the time. In fact, I heard this from somebody descended from their family. And he took his son with him, and he went in to see the Gaon. And as was his habit, he used the time asking his Rabbi his doubts and his questions. And one of the questions that he asked the Gaon was as follows. He said, you know that the miracles all occurred on a condition. Right? Chazal say that everything that was created on a condition. T'nai. The t'nai is that you exist in this natural form, but when I require it, you exist supernaturally. For example, the ocean was created with a condition that it will exist horizontally. When the time comes for the Jewish people to be saved, you will stand vertically. Right? In the creation of the ocean was put a t'nai, a condition. Many commentaries are very bothered by this concept. The Maharal has Maharal's famous second introduction to the Sefer HaGvurot. He debates at great length and explains at great length why is it necessary for Hashem to build a condition into the creation. Again, why doesn't He simply create the ocean horizontal? When it comes time to make it stand vertical, make it stand vertical. Why does He have to build into the horizontal nature of the ocean a condition at the moment of creation that when necessary it will stand vertical? Why do you have to make a condition? Do it the way you want it, and when you want to change it, change it. But nevertheless, there is a condition. When the ocean crashed back into its natural form and drowned the Egyptians, the verse says, "V'chaza hayam le'eis sanoi." The ocean returned to its strength. But the word eitano, its strength, can be rearranged to spell litnaoi. So the Chazal say, the Medrash says, litnaoi harishin. That means the ocean stood vertical, and when the time came to drown the Egyptians, it returned to its original, not condition, the English word condition has two meanings. I mean the conditional sense. That means that the ocean crashed back to the condition that had been made with it at the time of creation. Right? What was the condition? That you stand horizontal, when necessary you stand vertical. So Reb Chaim asked the Gaon the following question. If it says that the ocean returned to its original condition, there should be a verse in the Torah describing the creation of the oceans that manifests the condition. Everything has to be in Torah. And therefore, if it says that the ocean crashed back to its original, the condition that had been made with it, I should be able to look back in the Torah and see when the ocean was created, the Torah should express the condition that later manifests by the splitting of the ocean. Where does the Torah say a condition? That was his question to the Gaon of Vilna. Before the Gaon could answer, his son, right, little Itzela, pulled at his Abba's sleeve and he said, Tati, why did you ask the tzaddik? Why did you ask me? I could answer that question. So I don't know what Reb Chaim did. He probably tried to put him under the table or in his pocket. But the Gaon said, no, let him speak. And he picked the child up and he put him on a chair and he said, speak. And this is what the child said. He said, if you read the verses that describe the creation of the oceans, in Bereshis it says this, Yikavu hamayim mitachas lashamayim al mokem echad. Let all the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place. V'seiraya yabasha, and let the dry land be revealed. So here's what the little boy said. He said, look at that verse carefully. If Hashem gathers all the waters under heavens, you know the earth was covered in water, totally covered in water. And Hashem split the waters to reveal dry land for the creation of Adam. If Hashem gathers all the waters on earth, and He splits them, and gathers them into one place, of course the dry land is revealed. Why does the verse have to go on to say, and let the dry land be revealed? That's referring to a second time the dry land will be revealed, namely for the Jewish people to be formed. They go and kissed him on his head, and he said, that's the correct judge. Not bad for age 4 or 5. Right? But I think that there's something deeper here, which I'm sure the child did not understand. He knew to make the diuk in the pasuk, because there's an extraneous or an extra clause in that verse, which is left to tell you that the sea was split to save the Jewish people. But the deeper meaning is this. When Hashem creates the human being, He splits the waters. The world is covered in water. Hashem splits the waters. He makes a dry land. And on that surface, human being is formed. There's a second edition of the creation of the human being, and that's the Jewish people. When the waters are again split, and dry land is revealed, and the Jewish people are formed. And it's no accident. The first time the waters are split is the birth of humanity. Waters, explains the Maharal, is always the medium of inchoate, non-defined material. That's why in Hebrew, mayim is always plural. It has no singularity. It's always a plural word. Waters always means a non-formed, unformed, nebulous state that has no tzura, no form. When that is split to reveal dry land, definition of form can begin. This is what mikveh means. What does mikveh means? When it says yikavu amayim, let all the waters under heavens be gathered, the word there used is yikavu, which is mikveh. Mikveh means to go into the original primal waters. That's why the waters of a mikveh have to be naturally gathered waters. And what happens when you immerse yourself in the waters of a mikveh is you dissolve into a primal state that has no definition. The Tatz says that your intention for purity should not be when you go under the water, it should be when you come out. When you immerse yourself in the waters of a mikveh, you lose all shape and form. The intention for purity is when you come out of the water. That's the moment of birth. Like the child emerging from the waters. And therefore, the world is formed by waters being split, and that is a manifestation of birth and definition, and it happens twice. One, when waters are split on earth to reveal the human being's creation, and secondly, a second edition of that process, namely the birth of a Jewish people who are formed in a miraculous circumstance that begins their process through the world. So each of these miracles, obviously, when the Rambam says that each miracle was necessary, he doesn't only mean technically necessary to save the Jewish people. Each one is a mode of creation that reveals something deep. And so forth and so on. Samu, they were thirsty. Bakal Nesaeven, Hashem split the rock. Kafru boyadas kairach. We're not going to go this evening into the meaning of each of these miracles. But the community of Kairach rebelled against Moshe. Bala Sama'aretz, so the earth swallowed them up. V'chein shara isis. And similarly, all the rest of the miracles were done, not because they were necessary to prove faith, the veracity of belief in Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem, but because each one was necessary. So why did the Jewish people believe in Moshe? The Rambam's just got through telling you that we did not believe because of miracles. Miracles are problematic. You should not believe because of miracles. Miracles were done for other reasons. So why did we believe? B'ma'amad Sinai. Only because we stood at Sinai. She'einenu ro'eh v'lo yizar. Our eyes saw and no stranger. V'oznenu shamu v'lo yacher. And our ears heard and no one else. Ha'esh v'kolos. The fire and the voices, the noise, the sounds, the flames. V'nigash al arafel. And we saw Moshe Rabbeinu going into the mist. V'akol medaber. And the voice speaking to him. V'anu shonim. And we hear. And what we heard was Moshe, Moshe. Hashem saying, Moshe, Moshe, Leich, go, Emelem Kafa, go and tell them thus and thus. V'cheinu emer, and that's why it says, Panim b'panim diber Hashem imachem, Hashem spoke to you face to face. Why does the Rambam say Hashem called Moshe, Moshe? You know, there are many times in the Torah a person's name is doubled. At the Akedah, Hashem says Avram, Avram. Right? This is the only time in the Torah Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one whom Hashem addresses twice without any punctuation to differentiate between the two words. You know, the trop, the punctuation in Torah, anytime a name is doubled, there's always 6 times gabe. That means the correct way to read it is, you stop after the first word. Avram, Avram. There's always a gap between the two words. Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one where there's no gap. The Torah never punctuates. The way it's punctuated is Moshe, Moshe. There's no gap between the two. The reason is because every human being has 2 forms. You have your practical expression in the world, and you have your supernal source. And of course, the ideal human being is the one who's parallel, completely parallel, with no discrepancy. Unfortunately, most of us are not like that. Most of us have a perfect route, but the way we express ourselves in the world sometimes not perfect. Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one who's identical in both worlds. B'chol beisi ne'eman, he can walk around in this world and that world, makes no difference. When he walks here, he eats food. When he walks in that world, he doesn't need to eat. He can live here and eat food. He can live in that world for 40 days and 40 nights and not eat. He's identical in both worlds. And therefore, he's the one we hear Hashem saying, Moshe, Moshe, you are with me and you with them. And only because we heard Hashem speak to Moshe personally, do we trust that the rest of the Torah comes from the valid source, and that's our ultimate point of faith. So what do we have? We have a very difficult problem in front of us. The question is this. Miracles were performed when we left Egypt, and it's fundamental to relate to the miracles. Zeichel Etzias Mitzrayim, you have to go back to leaving Egypt, and the whole point of leaving Egypt, says the Rambam, is the miracles. And yet miracles are problematic, and you should not believe because of miracles, and if you do, there's something wrong with you. Why do we believe? Only because of Mer Hashem personally. Now what's going on? What is the reason for going back always to the miracles of leaving Egypt and basing the whole of Torah practice and thought on Zeichel Etzias Mitzrayim, and yet it's problematic? What is the real reason for believing in Hashem? Because we stood at Sinai, we met Him face to face. If so, why don't we continually hark back to that moment? The question, I hope, is clear. Let's try to think through this. It's a very, very difficult issue. Not at all simple. You know, I think the easiest way to do this is to show how often it's done wrong. Done wrong. Unfortunately, sometimes this is done in the so-called frum world, the religious world. And very often, you know, if you go to a Kiruv seminar, you know, one of these experiences where you go for 3 days over a weekend, you walk in a skeptical, doubting individual and you walk out fanatically sometimes in that form of teaching, some of these ideas are not put across in as sophisticated a way as they should. And very often it's taught like this. When the Jewish people experienced miracles in Egypt, that was not a convincing experience. Not 100% convincing. It was very good, no doubt. Miracles very, very convincing, but not 100%. And the Jewish people are very skeptical and doubting and questioning. And therefore, anything less than 100% proof would not be good enough for us. Because later in history, doubts could always be raised. And therefore, we went to Sinai to clinch the question. You ever heard it presented that way? What happened in Egypt was 95% proof, 96, 98% proof. What happened at Sinai was 100%. That's how it's usually presented. That means you believe in Hashem because of miracles. Well, it's very, very powerful. But is it 100%? No. Not 100%. Miracles you could be mistaken about. But when we stood at Sinai and met Hashem personally and died, that means our neshama was actually bonded with Hashem. And then we were revived and died again and revived again. That left no room for doubt. And therefore, miracles were not good enough. We needed to stand at Sinai. And that's why Hashem took us to Sinai. And that explanation is not correct. And let me try to show you why it's not correct. First of all, the original question remains. If the proofs of leaving Egypt were not 100%, why do we need them? And secondly, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Sinai is not 100% either. And conversely, the proofs leaving Egypt were certainly good enough. Let's try to establish that and then see if we can Let's move further. First of all, the miracles in leaving Egypt were certainly good enough. How do we know? Because Hashem said so. Hashem said, I'm now going to perform miracles in Egypt. Laman Teda, that you should know she'ein kamoni b'chol haaretz. That type of verse appears 4 or 5 times during the Exodus. Hashem says to Moshe, go and tell Paroi, go and tell Pharaoh, that you're now going to experience unprecedented miracles, that you should know who I am. So if Hashem says that miracles are good enough to show you who He is, they've got to be good enough. And the truth is they were good enough. The Egyptians got the message. When they threw a stick to the ground and it became a serpent, there was room to doubt. But sooner or later, during the process, they got the message. The Egyptians said, Etzva Alakim, this is the finger of Hashem. And they were not interested in seeing the truth. And they were big-time sorcerers and manipulators of the natural. They recognized Hashem through the miracles of leaving Egypt. And even if you want to tell me that throwing a stick to the ground and making it into a serpent is dubious, are you going to say that about splitting the ocean? About supplying a whole nation of millions of people with manna in the desert for many years? Do you know how many Jews there were? There were probably about 7 million people. There were 600,000 men. There were 600,000 children younger than that. There were 600,000 people older than that. Right? How much is that? 1.8 million. There were women equivalent to all of that. That was only men. That's already how much?
3.6.
And there were Erev Rav as many as the 3.6 million. Right? The Medrash says that as many Jews. There was an Erev Rav. So you're talking about over 7 million people. And these people were fed for many years. Nobody has ever suggested that there was some sort of sleight of hand, some sort of... Right? Those miracles were good enough to convince the Jewish people and good enough to convince the Egyptians. And look at it this way. If the miracles are not good enough to convince us, how did Hashem hold the Egyptians responsible? If you're going to give me miracles that are only 95% proof and hold me accountable and hold the Egyptians accountable, and then you're going to tell me, well, if you believe because of that, there's a problem with you. That's not clinching, it's not 100%. You need to stand at Sinai. But Hashem held the Egyptians responsible. And if you're going to tell me that the miracles are good enough, then why did we just stand at Sinai? Either way you have a problem. If miracles are 100% and good enough, why did Hashem have to put us at Sinai and let us here speaking to Moshe to convince us? And if you want to tell me that that is necessary, because less than that is not good enough, how did the Egyptians get the message with less than that? Do you see the difficulty? Let's take it one step further. Standing at Sinai does not clinch the question. And the reason is because there's no such thing as absolute knowledge. There's no such thing as absolute knowledge. The human being can never know anything absolutely. Not even the Sinai experience. You could stand at Sinai, the next morning you could wake up and think that you had an amazing hallucination or dream the day before. It's possible. It's possible. You know that the Rav Tzadok says that if Aristotle would have been at Sinai, the next day he would have brought Moshe Rabbeinu 100 proofs that it could not have happened. There's no such thing as absolute knowledge. It's a well-known feature of the human psyche that we are not capable of absolute knowledge. Let me prove that to you. Are you awake? I mean, those of you who are you awake right now? Would you say you're awake?
Yes.
Okay, good. Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Are you absolutely sure? No. You cannot be sure. Maybe you're at home in bed, dreaming that you're listening to a wonderful discussion about Yetzias Mitzrayim and you're dreaming. The fact that you feel awake is not a proof. When you dream, you think you're awake. That's why you can go through such ecstasy or such abject terror in a dream. If you knew you were dreaming, you wouldn't be so afraid. So the fact that you feel awake is no proof. When you dream, you also feel you're awake. So how do you know you're awake? I mean, this shouldn't bother you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, if it disturbs you seriously, you need therapy. But intellectually, you cannot be absolutely sure. Russell, the great philosopher, showed that you can't even prove that the world is more than 5 minutes old. The world might have popped into existence 5 minutes ago with all your memories intact and in place. Again, this shouldn't distress you, but it's theoretically possible. There's no such thing as absolute knowledge. You know what the Ramban says? Listen to this. This is extreme. This is the Ramban talking about knowledge of Torah. Listen to this. This you'll find in the Ramban's introduction to his work on the Baal HaMor. Listen to this. He says that when I bring you various proofs of the positions that I'm going to bring you, he says, do not stress yourself. He says, do not do not force yourself to try to force yourself through the eye of a needle, to rebut my positions, because the matter is not thus. Because anybody who learns our Torah knows that in the discussion of its commentaries, there are no such things as Rayas Gemuras, as complete proofs. And not with the sharpest of questions can you get absolute clarity. Because there is no such thing in this wisdom as a moifes barur, as a clear, incisive proof. Not even as good as mathematics or engineering. Isn't that amazing? The Ramban's telling you that in our Torah, there's no such thing, not even knowledge, as good or solid as mathematics and engineering. Amazing thing. In other words, you can never achieve absolute knowledge. What can you achieve? Good enough working knowledge. You know, anyone who says to you, I'm not religious because I never saw a proof. I want one proof, is being insincere and dishonest. Because there's no other area of his life that he can ask for a proof in, because he never has. Think about it. All the things that you do in life, even life and death decisions, you never base on absolute knowledge. When you trust a doctor, when you go for surgery, when you fly on a plane, when you do something really dangerous like get married, you know, whatever it is, you can never base on absolute knowledge. All you can ever ask for is good enough knowledge. How good is that? I don't know, 80%, 90%, 95%, 98%, whatever it is. You never have available to you more secure knowledge than that, and you never ask for it because you can't. A person who's sincere should be saying, give me evidence for religion, for Torah, as good as I get in any other area of life. That is legitimate, and that we can answer. But a person who says, I'm prepared to accept 95%, 98% in other areas of my life, but give me 100% when it comes to Torah, is being dishonest and inaccurate. And we cannot supply that standard. All he has a right to ask is evidence, not proof, but evidence. We shouldn't talk about proof, we should talk about evidence. Evidence as good as I require in other areas of my life. And that standard we can match. And therefore, let's go back. If leaving Egypt was a proof, let's use the word evidence. Was evidence good enough to satisfy that standard? Why do we need to go to Sinai? And furthermore, Sinai is not 100% either. And I think the answer is along these lines. The answer is, you know, why do you have to hear it from me? Listen to what the Ramban says. The Ramban says that the reason we stood at Sinai, it says like this. The reason that we stood at Sinai, and we have a mitzvah to remember it always, and to teach our children this, is because that before Hashem mentions the commandments, He gives us a mitzvah to remember and never forget Sinai. Hamamad Hahu, that great moment we stood at Sinai. We should never remove this from our hearts. By the way, it's an amazing thing. You know, the mitzvah to remember Sinai is not phrased as a mitzvah to remember. It's phrased as a mitzvah never to forget. You know, there's 6 things that you should remember every day. Right? Some people say this every morning after Shabbos. There are 6 things that are mitzvahs to remember, but 5 of them are phrased as remember, and 1 is phrased as not forgetting. Zachas Yom HaShabbos is to remember. Leman Tizkor, to remember leaving Egypt, right? They all remember. There's only one that is Raki Shamalacha, take great care, Pen Tishkach, lest you forget. And the reason for that, as very beautifully expressed by Moshe Shapira, the reason is this. Telling someone to remember something presupposes the fact that he's forgotten. Remember, recall, remind yourself. Telling someone not to forget presupposes that he's living there and he hasn't forgotten. Just warn him not to move away. There's 5 things you have to remember and remind yourself all the time. There's one thing that you should never have forgotten. And then the mitzvah is, you should be living at Sinai. The Ramban says, "Libeinu ve'einenu sham kol hayamim." Our heart and our eyes should always be there. You are living on Sinai, and wherever you walk in life, you are standing. You know, the Ramban says elsewhere that the Mishkan, which you mentioned, the Mishkan was a portable Sinai. The Mishkan was a portable Sinai. You know that some Mepharshim say that the imagery also is the same. What was Sinai? A mountain with flames on top, out of which the Torah emerged. What was in the Mishkan? An aroim, on which are golden kruvim in the shape of flames. You know, their wings were raised above them, golden wings, like flames. You know that golden fire, the same Kabbalistic middah. I'm sure you're all black belt Kabbalists here in Pesach, and I'm sure you know that fire is midas hadin, right? Water is midas chesed, fire is midas hadin, and gold is midas hadin, silver is chesed, right? But from the strong side, the left-hand side, is midas hadin, and therefore you have gold arching over the Orin, just like the flames arched over Sinai, and we're moving through the desert and through life with that portable Sinai taken with us. And therefore that must never leave our minds. That which we saw and heard ourselves. And we have to give this b'mitzvahs essay, shenedir b'lechol zarenu, to tell our children this from every generation, everything that we saw and heard at Sinai. And there's a tremendous benefit in this mitzvah. Because if our relationship with Torah came only through Moshe Rabbeinu, whose truth was validated by miracles, that would be problematic. Why? Because if there would arise among us a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and would command us opposite to the Torah, and provide a miracle, what will happen? People will begin to doubt. Why? Because we learned before, miracles are problematic. You could provide another miracle the other way. But when the Torah reaches us from Hashem Himself, to our ears, and our eyes are seeing. Very beautiful. You notice he says, our ears and our eyes that saw. Isn't that a strange expression? Why does he say that? Why does the Ramban say, our ears and eyes saw?
Because seeing is higher than hearing. Like you see the whole picture altogether, but hearing is one.
That happens to be true, but I don't think that's why he's saying it. No, I think the reason is because it says at Sinai they saw that which was at Sinai it says they saw the sounds. They saw the sounds. So the Ramban says when we stood at Sinai, our ears and eyes saw. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? Ein shamem soy. There was no intermediary. Therefore, nakchish kol chelek. We will rebut any doubter who comes along, anybody who comes to raise doubts. Kokol masapek, and anybody who gives us doubt. V'neshakar, so we'll say that he's a liar. Lo yoyileu ois v'lo yetzeleu moifes. No sign or wonder will save him. Ki anachnu ayodim mishikruso, because we know that he's a liar. Why? Because we didn't come to our knowledge through miracles. We came to our knowledge through direct experience. Zer sho'amad. That's why it says sham. V'gam b'chai yaminu lo'elav. You will always believe. When we copy this or transmit this to our children, this is an incredible statement. Listen to this. Our children will know that this thing was true, below safek, with no doubt, as if every generation had seen it themselves. Because we would never testify falsely to our children. We would never give them an inheritance of an empty thing that does not help. Our children will never doubt this. With the testimony that we give them. They will believe totally that we saw with our eyes, all of us, all that we have told them. What's he talking about, the Rabbi? What does he mean? What do you mean children will never doubt? We don't see children doubting? What does he mean? That this will never leave us, each generation will give it to the next, but because we stood there ourselves at Sinai, and we're not telling our children a story of miracles, they will never have a doubt. What does it mean? Why should children believe any more in the truth that we tell them that we stood there, or that someone told us that someone told them that they stood there, than if we tell our children they were miracles? What's he trying to say, the Rambam? And it's common experience that children doubt. What's going on? And I think the answer is along these lines. It's a very, very difficult subject. It needs a lot of work. But I think a beginning of a direction is this. Leaving Egypt was not 100% proof. It was evidence. How good? Good enough. Sinai was not 100% either. The reason we needed both was as follows. The miracles that occurred when we left Egypt were good enough to establish Hashem's presence. In fact, the Ramban says, not only do the miracles establish Hashem's presence, they teach us everything we need to know about Him. Famous Ramban, he says this. He says that because people would come along later in history, this is the Ramban at the end of Parshas Boy, because people would come along at the end of history and start denying Hashem's presence and His power, right? They would come along and say there were those makrishim yidiyasai pratis, that Hashem knows what's doing in the world in detail, and they will say, how could Hashem, who's so high, know details in the world? Or mehem yodu biyadiyah. Some would say that Hashem knows, but makrishim bashgacha. They would say that Hashem is not in control, He doesn't pay attention to what goes here. V'yasu Adam, they would make the human being kidgei yam, like fish in the ocean. In other words, Hashem is not concerned with each one of us. Shelo yashgiach hakel bahem, that Hashem does not take care about every human being. It doesn't reward and punish us. V'kasher yitzal elokim ba'edo b'yachid. When Hashem wants a community or an individual, v'yaseh imay meifes, and He performs a miracle, b'shinui minhaga shel olam, He changes the natural process in the world, b'tivoi, and its natural order. Yizbar lakol bitl adayas ha'eleh. People will become aware that all of these false ideas are completely wrong. Ki ha'meifes ha'nifla meireh, and here's our first clue as to why miracles are necessary. Because a miracle will teach, first of all, sheyesh lo'elam eloika, that there's a God in the world. Mechadsho creates it. V'yodea knows what's going on. Mashgiach. Why does he say this? Because when we left Egypt, the miracles, the man famously explains, the miracles did not only demonstrate Hashem's presence, but they demonstrated all the fundamentals of belief. That there's a God, that He knows what's doing, that He interferes, that He's mashgiach, that He rewards and punishes. You can count up all the ikrim, all the fundamentals of Jewish belief, and see that the miraculous process of leaving Egypt teaches each one of those. That we are saved, the Egyptians are punished. That He rewards measure for measure. That He interacts with human history. Right? All the ikrim are taught. Right? That he speaks to people, establishes the fundamental of prophecy. And on this the whole Torah stands. And the Rambam goes on to say that we are given mitzvahs to recall this process. So I think what's going on is something like this. Leaving Egypt gave us a good enough experience to establish once and for all of these fundamental knowledge aspects of Hashem. And not only good enough for us, good enough for the Egyptians. We were taken to Sinai for something completely different. And this is almost inexpressibly beautiful. We were not taken to Sinai to be given a deeper or more reliable proof of Hashem's existence. We were taken there for, Rav Shapiro put it like this, and you can't say it more beautifully. He said we were taken to Sinai not for a better level of proof. He put it like this: Ze lo inyan shel otzmat ha'hochacha. We were not taken there. It was not a question of the intensity of the proof. Ze inyan shel echut ha'yediyah. It was a question of the quality of the knowledge. Again, we were not taken to Sinai for a better proof. We were taken to Sinai for a personal relationship with Hashem. Evidence was good enough in Egypt. Good enough for us, good enough for Egyptians. But that was not a personal marital relationship. Because when you believe by virtue of miracles, you're believing by virtue of an intermediary. The river turns to blood, that's got to be done by something. That's not natural. What does that mean? There's a God in the world. Have you met Him? No. Sinai was for the purpose of meeting and marrying and bonding and becoming one with Hashem. And that's not for Egyptians, that's only for us. In other words, here's the key. What happened in Egypt was a complete, let's loosely use the word proof, of Hashem's existence and all fundamentals of Jewish belief. But that is not a personal marital experience. I would say, if you want a very crude analogy, you're thinking of marrying a girl who lives in Australia. Would you consider such a thing? So, huh? Why not? Why not? So you communicate with them. You write letters, I don't know, you email, you Skype each other, you know, you
According to you, should be South African, though.
May you be so lucky. And you get to know her. Do you doubt her existence? No. Is it theoretically possible somebody's fooling you? You know, she's somebody's avatar? No, maybe, theoretically. Does it seriously concern you? No. So you have a communication, but it's indirect. And then you meet her and you marry her. That's a personal meshing, bonding, becoming one. The world knows Hashem and has a right to know Him and should know Him through inference, because He controls things in the world, because you see miracles. That's good enough, but it's not a personal relationship. We're not taken to Sinai for a better level of proof. We're taken to Sinai for a different quality of knowledge. And that's not for Egyptians. The rest of the world and the Jewish people at their unformed stage in Egypt get the message by inference, by indirect experience, by miracles. That's good enough for that. Because it gives you intellectual knowledge. There's a God in the world. He knows what's going on. He rewards and punishes. He teaches. He speaks to human beings. But the Jewish people were lifted out of that experience to something totally different at Sinai. At Sinai, they lifted off this planet and entered another zone of experience. And that's what defines us. Going out of Egypt is good enough to establish all the fundamentals. How good? 98%, 99%. It's good enough. Sinai doesn't give you a better level of proof. That's not the point. It gives you a direct experience. And that's the Jewish people's nature. That's who we are. Let's just study this. Are we talking too long here? No. Is this too long? I don't want to get fired. You know, not... Can you give me a second? I'll stop for questions, okay? Just give me a moment to complete this thought. Knowledge by inference, the Torah does not regard as knowledge. Let me give an example. In the laws of evidence, this is for the lawyers. In the laws of evidence in Torah, you can only testify if you experience the thing yourself. By the way, do you know that in Jewish law, evidence is a reconstruction of the crime? Do you know that? In non-Jewish law, evidence is testify. In Judaism, giving evidence is example. Let's say a Jew witnesses another Jew cursing, right? What we call Birkas Hashem, euphemistically. What you say in English, blasphemy, right? Cursing. Now, there's a case based in as assessing the Jew. Yeah, the witnesses have to come into court. They're not allowed to tell the judges that they heard a person. They have to say what he said. You know what happens in a Beis Din? What then happens? They clear the court. The Dayanim of the Beis Din sit there. No one else allowed to be there. The witness has to say again what the person said, and the judge has to tear their clothes. The witness has to come into court. The aide has to stand there. He has to say again the curse that he heard uttered. He has to reconstruct it to the extent that the Dayan has to hear it and tear his clothes when he hears Hashem cursed in that way. You don't testify to what happened. You reconstruct it. And you can only do that because you personally experienced it. Example. The Gemara says that Shimon ben Shetach one day saw a murder. He saw a murder. He saw a man running after someone else with a sword. He saw with intent to kill. And he pursued them to try to stop the tragedy that was about to occur. But he was too late. And what happened was the victim ran into a room. And the aggressor ran after him. And Shimon ben Shetach arrived in the room a millisecond later. He found the man on the floor with a mortal wound, dying of his wound, and the other man standing with a bloody sword over him, right? And the Gemara says there was no way that it could have happened. There's no way that he could have fallen on the sword. It was absolutely critically clear that he had killed him. And Shimon HaShadach walked up to the murderer and he said to him, Rasha, you evil man, but what can I do? The Torah has not delivered your blood into my power. Why? Because I never saw the blow. Now, in a court of law, in the non-Jewish context, that is better than circumstantial. There was no one else present. It was a sealed room. There was no one else. He came a second after it happened. He saw intent. He saw everything. Now, in Jewish law, nothing doing. You cannot testify to that crime. Why? Because circumstantial evidence, the problem is not that it's weak. Sometimes circumstantial evidence can be better than personal experience. You know why? Because personal experience also can be wrong. There's all sorts of optical illusions. Don't people think that they saw a certain thing and it turns out to be completely distorted? It's not a question of reliability. It's a question of personal experience. Circumstantial evidence in Jewish law is not good enough. Not because it's not conclusive enough, but because you did not experience it yourself. Is this point clear? And yet personal experience, even though theoretically it's not conclusive, is good enough in Jewish law. Why? Because you saw it yourself. Is it possible that when you see something yourself, something crazy is going on, and you're distorting perception? Yes. But that is out of the range of human knowledge. And we never take that into account. This is what's called da'as. Da'as means personal knowledge. Is personal knowledge 100% reliable? No. Are you awake now? Yes. Is it 100%? No. Is it nighttime outside now? Yes. Well, you know, maybe your perception would be distorted. Maybe something happened to your clock and your internal mechanism. Maybe it's day. Maybe something's happened to the nerves in your eyes and you think it's dark. If you think that way, you need medical treatment. Is it possible? Yes. But we're not dealing here with theoretical possibilities. We're dealing with personal experience. That's what the Torah calls da'as. And therefore, we went to Sinai for a personal experience. We went there to meet Hashem and bond with Him and become one with Him. Not for a clinching level of circumstantial or otherwise nature evidence. That's not the point. And therefore, the secret here is that what happened in Egypt was a good enough teaching of all the principles that are necessary. Good enough for Egyptians, good enough for us. But it's all inferential. It's all circumstantial. It's all once removed. It's good enough to establish fact, but it's not called personal experience. And then we went to Sinai for a personal marital bonding that would live in our blood to the extent that when we tell it to our children, they will believe. Not because it's a clinching or better level of evidence, but because in the Jewish soul is always a fire that was ignited at Sinai that can always be evoked, that can always be brought to the surface. It can be suppressed, of course it can be suppressed. But it can always be ignited. And no matter how deeply it's buried in the Jewish heart, right, it can always be. And sometimes in those Jewish hearts that try to bury it more deeply, you can evoke a stronger response. The Ramban doesn't mean that any Jewish parent tells his child, the child will unquestioningly believe. Of course that's wrong. What he means is that now that we were fired by that experience and we bonded with Hashem, we died, our souls become one with Him. There will burn in our veins a fire that will last until Mashiach comes, and no matter what the tortures and the difficulties of exile, there will always be an ability to relate to a personal experience that is utterly unlike a contextual, circumstantial, inferential experience, right? That is what the Jewish neshama is capable of. And that's what we are required to relate to. Let's just spend one more moment before we take questions, if I can. We've left one question unanswered. And that is? Of course. Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. If this Sinai experience was what we are claiming that it is, this level of personal intensity, then the question becomes even more difficult. Then of course everything should be relating only to that moment. And why is all of Judaism based on leaving Egypt and the miracles? Let me leave you with a suggestion. I'm not claiming that this is a total answer, but I hope that this is a direction for fruitful work. The Ramban continues, and I'll finish with this. All these mitzvahs that take us back to Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim and remind us about the miracles that we experienced when we left Egypt. He says the purpose of the miracles is like this. This is perhaps the most famous Ramban in Chumash. At the end of Parashas Bo. Umina nisim hagdolim hamuvasamim. And from the great and famous miracles, famous mean publicly experienced miracles, Adam Moide, a person is led to acknowledge benisim anistorim, that everything that happens is also miraculous. She'ein yesod haTorah kula, which is the foundation of the whole Torah. Listen to these words. She'ein la'adam chelek b'Torahs Moshe Rabbeinu. A person has no share in the Torah of Moshe, no share at all. until you believe that all the events and circumstances that surround us, shekulam nisim, are all miraculous. Ein bahem tava, there's no such thing as nature. Uminhaga shel olam, there's no such thing as a natural process in the world. Bein barabim, bein b'yachid. In other words, he's telling you, the Ramban, the purpose of the miracles was not to establish that Hashem exists. Although it was good enough for that, and we surpassed that later. The purpose of the miracles was to teach you that when you move in a natural world, after you have experienced miracles, you should be sensitized to realize that every breath you draw, and every seeming coincidence, and every natural phenomenon that happens to you in the world is as miraculous as the ocean splitting and manna descending from heaven and the world going crazy and turning upside down in a miraculous blaze of transcendence. The purpose of being a Jew is to walk through the natural world and know that no aspect of this natural world is really natural. That all the things that you relate to in the natural world that lull you into a familiarity and dull your sensitivity, each of those things is as miraculous as a sea splitting and a people being born in a blaze of transcendence. Right? The purpose of being a Jew, in other words, is not to live at Sinai out of the world, but to take Sinai back into the world and know that every natural phenomenon that you experience is miraculous. And here's the difference between us and other people. A non-Jew, any human being on earth, should be sensitized to the point that as he moves through the natural world and a child is born or he draws a breath, he should know that this is as miraculous as the splitting of the ocean. But a Jew should be able to know that, and not only know that this is miraculous, but carry in his heart a personal memory of the one who performs these miracles. That means, as a human, you should know that because the world has experienced these miracles, all natural phenomena come from the same place. But as a Jew, you go further than that, because you have met the one who performs those miracles. And therefore, I think what the Ramban is telling us is the purpose of being a Jew is, yes, you have to live at Sinai in the sense that you live a personal marital relationship with Hashem. But then you have to bring that down off Sinai, as it were, and you have to move through the world, and you have to manifest that level of knowledge and intimacy in the mundane level of physical existence in the world. And that's possibly more of a challenge than living in the rarefied atmosphere of Sinai and meditation and transcendence. That's not our path. Our path is to have one of our feet, as it were, in that world, and another one in the natural world, and make sure that the two are bonded into one. If there are any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to try. Even a Canadian question? Yeah.
That was actually a question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
The final connection between...
Yeah. I think so. Maybe there's more to it. You know, that's what the Ramban says. He says that the purpose of miracles is to teach you that there's no such thing as a natural world. And the purpose of being a Jew is to live in the natural and know that it's invested with something deeper. This is an important subject and it'll take a long time to work out fully. But just a word is that the non-Jewish vision of spirituality is to leave the world entirely. Right? All non-Jewish paths that manifest the spiritual leave the world. They beat the body into submission and they transcend the body. In fact, they're very conflicted when it comes to the body. Christianity is fraught with guilt about sensuality and the body. If you're serious about spirituality as a Christian, you have become a monk or a nun. Right? All paths, all spiritual paths besides us, teach that the body is problematic. The physical material world is a very great problem. If you engage it, it will bring you down. And what's unique about Judaism is that we engage the physical world and lift it up. The deepest Jewish obsession is the theme of oneness. And Avraham Avinu came to the world to unite the spiritual and the physical worlds, to make them into one. And the rest of the world said to him, you're crazy. If you try to engage the physical world, it will bring you down. Long before you manage to bring it up. The whole process of Judaism is to live in the natural physical world and to elevate that. That's what a mitzvah is. A mitzvah is a physical activity that lifts the material to the world of spirit. And I think that's what the Ramban is saying. Come down from Sinai and go back into the natural world, bearing in your heart a connection with Hashem, and walk through the natural world reminding yourself that each of these natural phenomena is as miraculous as the things you saw at Sinai. Yes, please.
If you're saying that every natural thing is miraculous, what I don't understand is, Chandra Bhatta, are saying that, no, those miracles, they weren't really miracles because they have to happen anyway, doesn't that really strengthen that they're miracles?
We didn't say that they weren't miracles. No?
Well, you were saying that they have to happen anyway, that they have to eat, they have to do this, but they weren't really, didn't really count as miracles.
What the Rambam says is like this. The reason the miracles happened was because we had a need. We didn't have food, so Hashem had to provide food. So He provided miraculously. I didn't say it wasn't a miracle. Again, the Rambam says like this. Why did the sea split? The Egyptians needed to be drowned, so Hashem had to destroy them. So the miracle was necessary. Doesn't mean it wasn't a miracle. The ocean splitting is definitely a miracle.
It's a greater miracle.
It's what?
Wouldn't you say, though, it's a greater miracle because...
Greater than what?
Greater than just simply going against the course of nature. The fact that it served a need made it a greater miracle than just the magic of Egypt, let's say.
The magic of Egypt we don't regard as miracles. Those are manipulations of the natural. That is sorcery. That's called kshafim. Miracle is something that Hashem does that perverts the natural phenomenon in a revealed way. Let me speak one moment about this. There are two classes of miracles, very briefly. Maybe we'll finish with this. Is that okay? There's two classes of miracles. There's nisim nistorim and nisim nigli. A nes nista is a miracle that we would call a coincidence. Meaning unbelievable coincidence, but does not break a law of nature. A nes nigla is a breach of a law of nature. The first category is like this. You go for a run. You accidentally run off the edge of a cliff. You fall. You grab a little twig growing out of the cliff face, and you hang there, dangling over 5,000 feet of empty space. Jagged rocks at the bottom. Very unpleasant. And as you hang there, this little twig starts to break. And as it snaps, it just so happens that there's somebody practicing throwing ropes over the edges of cliffs that day. And you grab the rope and he pulls you up. That would leave you pretty firm for at least 3 or 4 days. Why? Because you experienced a miracle. But no law of nature was broken. All that happened was an incredibly distant coincidence. That's called a nes nista. It's a miracle because it's wow when you consider the statistics, but it's not a breach of a law of nature. Here's the second class of nes. You go for a run, you run off the edge of a cliff, you fall, you grab a little twig, it tears itself out of the cliff, and you levitate up and float back on. That would leave you from for a week at least. That's called a nes nigla. Why? Because a law of nature is broken, at least in our perception. Gravity, right, in that case was broken. We no longer see those miracles. When prophecy ended, 2,350 years ago, just after the time of Megillas Esther, during the time of the Anshe Knesset Agdela, when prophecy ended, open miracles ceased. And since that day, we have never seen a revealed miracle. Without going into the exception of the Tanoim and Amoraim who did manipulate the natural. That's a wonderful subject, fantastic discussion. I'm not going to go into that now. But the general principle is that when prophecy ended, miracles ended. So we see now only what we call the hidden type miracles. Unbelievable coincidences. And one should make a list of the ones that occur to you, because they build emunah. But you'll never get to see, until Mashiach comes, revealed miracles. Right? Yeah, I have a whole list of them. I mean, I've experienced some of these coincidences that I've documented. Yeah, I'll give you can I give one example? Sure. I'll give you one example. I have a friend called Shmuel Geller. Shmuel Geller lives in Zichron Yaakov, and this is the incident that occurred to him. He is the grandson of a person called Shmuel Geller, his grandfather, who was a very learned individual who came from Galicia and settled in Galveston, Texas. Right? He was a sheikh and a moel. He started a school and Talmud Torah. And he had a large family, and they spread all over America. And his grandson, Shmuel, who's named for his grandfather, decided to publish a book in his honor. So he published a very beautiful book called From Galicia to Galveston. It has a little picture of his grandfather and a little ship sailing the waves. And it describes his grandfather and all the family, to the family tree and photographs. And in honor of his grandfather, he published it like this book. But on the back, on the Hebrew, that means on the reverse side, it has a Hebrew cover. Because his grandfather, when he was a boy in yeshiva 3-4 generations before, had made some notes on the Gemara that he was studying together with his chavros, and apparently they were very good. And these handwritten notes had survived. and they were handed down in the family to Shmuel. So in honor of his grandfather, he published this book in English about the family. But if you turn it over, it has a Hebrew cover, and it says Chidushei Torah of Shmuel Geller, and the name of whoever was the young Chabrusa who had studied with him all those generations before, and he published the book. As soon as the book was ready, he flew to the United States with a whole suitcase of him to go and see all his cousins and uncles and aunts and give them copies of the book. And he got onto the plane in Tel Aviv. There happened to be an empty seat next to him. And he happened to have a copy of his book with him, and it happened to be lying on the seat, and it happened to be lying with the Hebrew side up. And as he's putting on his belt for takeoff, a young Hesder yeshiva boy about his own age, Bocha, is walking down the aisle, does a double take, comes back, looks, and says, "Hey, that's my name." He turned out to be the grandson of the Chavrusa. Named for his grandfather. Like, now you work out the statistical chance of these two people. And by the way, when miracles like this occur, when coincidences like this occur, people of great spiritual perception are totally unmoved. Completely unmoved. Because why? The Ramban's telling you. You should be sensitive to, you should know that everything that happened. When Shmuel got back from America, I was present the day he arrived. And he came to tell his Rabbi, Rav Moshe Shapir. It's one of the great thinkers of this generation. I'll never forget the experience. It was a Tuesday afternoon. We were waiting for the Chabura to begin. And Shmuel got off the plane in Tel Aviv. And he screamed across the country to get to Jerusalem in time for the Chabura. Just before we went inside, he ran up to Rav Moshe and he said to him, in Hebrew, he said, "You have to hear this story." And he told him this whole story. I'll never forget the response. Rav Moshe looked at him and said to him, "No." Totally unmoved. So Shmuel thought maybe he didn't hear, so he told him the whole story again. This was Rav Moshe's response. He said to him in the icy words, he said to him, "Ata mevi li raya shakadosh baruch hu manhig et ha'olam." He said, "Are you trying to bring me a proof that Hashem runs the world?" And he turned. Shmuel almost started crying. He said, "Oh, was they fantastic? They're fantastic." So Rav Moshe said, "No, they're fantastic." So that's the kind of, we only see those. We don't see revealed miracles. And that is the principle. When you see those coincidences, you have to be sensitized and know they come from the same place. Right? Okay, thank you very much.